The latest on the investigation into the fatal crash at LaGuardia. Tom Hansen of CBS News was at that briefing we brought you last hour from the National Transportation Safety Board. He joins me now live from LaGuardia. So, Tom, what new information did we learn?
Andrew, this was perhaps the most informative press conference that we have heard from the NTSB so far in this investigation. They've had about a full 24 hours on the ground here, sifting through the debris, collecting information, getting those black boxes, those data recorders from the tail of the plane, and learning some of the audio that was happening in real time as this tragic crash unfolded. We got the last 3 minutes from this flight, which you can see the plane is still sitting on the runway behind me. We have the last 3 minutes of what these pilots heard and said before the crash that took their lives. And I want to read part of that to you because it is informative. There's going to be a full transcript that's released tomorrow, but here's what we know so far. At 2 minutes and 22 seconds to landing, the plane checked in with LaGuardia's tower. It was then cleared to land. At 1 minute and 3 seconds, an airport vehicle, which would ultimately be the vehicle that crashed with the plane, made a radio transmission to the tower, but that was stepped on. Now, when I say that it was stepped on, that means that 2 audio transmissions, one from the truck and one from another source, are coming in at the same time. They essentially cancel each other out, and thus no one can hear what messages the other person is saying. But shortly thereafter, they requested to cross runway 4, where this crash happened. At 40 seconds, LaGuardia asked which vehicle needed to cross the runway. NTSB referred to this vehicle as Truck 1. 25 seconds till the crash. Truck 1 requested to cross the runway. A few seconds later, they were cleared to cross. Now, at 8 seconds, the landing gear for the plane touches down. 4 seconds, the tower tells the truck to stop, and then the recording ends, and we know what the outcome was. So we got a detailed timeline of events, but as I mentioned, a full transcript will be released. Now, there was another thing that NTSB Chairwoman Jennifer Homendy really pointed out, which has to do with airport surface detection equipment, otherwise known as ASDE. Think of this as equipment that uses the radar to paint a real-time picture of everything moving around the airport's surface. Essentially, she said that that equipment did not detect the truck that was crossing the runway directly in front of the plane. And so that's how this catastrophe unfolded. She mentioned that there was not a transponder in the truck. In the United States, the NTSB does not currently require any trucks to have transponders. There's no blanket rule there. But had there been a transponder in this truck, it would have alerted that software and alarm bells would have gone off. Potentially, this disaster could have been averted. She made it clear to point out that many, many things went wrong. This was a multifaceted tragedy here. This was not just one individual thing. The final thing I want to bring up, Andrew, and I know this is a lot of information that I'm throwing at you, is air traffic control. She did confirm with us today that there were 2 controllers in the tower, but here's where it gets a little confusing. She did not know, they have not specified whether or not or who was doing what, essentially. There are 2 separate duties. One is to maintain the safety of the airspace and the ground, and the other one is to maintain communications with the operations. They don't know who was doing what. And so that's something that they are going to learn about this afternoon. They plan on interviewing the people who were in the tower at the time of the crash at 4 p.m. today. And we are going to await any information that we get from NTSB on that, just to figure out exactly who knew what and who was communicating with who. Those are questions that have yet to be answered, Andrew.
Yeah, Tom, you're raising some very good points. So much information. And in fact, I just want to play a bit of what we heard at the briefing. We'll just listen and then I'll ask you about it.
In this situation for the midnight shift, it is standard operating procedure that they only have 2 on duty, and those 2 perform the duties of other controllers. That is our understanding right now. However, we're going to further dig into that as part of our investigation. Certainly, I can tell you that our air traffic control team has stated this is a problem, that this is a concern for them for years.
And that's one of the key questions, Tom. She also said LaGuardia, very busy airport, 900 flights a day, a real question around whether or not the tower is properly staffed with the people that it needs, particularly on the midnight shift.
Yeah, well, that's a really good point. That goes to the point of fatigue. It goes to an industry that is chronically understaffed. Andrew, I can tell you, after listening to Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy yesterday, he outlined the numbers of the staffing here. LaGuardia, contrary to this tragic circumstance here, actually has one of the better staffing situations of these airports across the country. There are the target for fully staffed would be 37 air traffic controllers here. They are currently at 33, so only 4 vacant positions. There are 6 people who are training to become air traffic controllers. And, but it does raise the main question here, which is who was doing what, who was talking to who, and were they fatigued? This was the overnight shift. She said that it was standard for 2 air traffic controllers to be in the tower during the overnight shift. During the daytime, when operations are far busier, presumably there are more people who are handling and coordinating. But, it gets back to the point here, Andrew, which is that truck was actually responding to another emergency, a United Airlines flight that reported fumes or gas or an odor. And so they were rushing to yet another emergency only to drive right into the emergency that we're covering here today. That's a lot of coordination for just 2 people, regardless of if that's considered fully staffed.
Yeah, and I guess my final question to you is some of the questions that still remain. I think there was one question that was brought up by a reporter from Montreal who said, did the firefighters in that truck hear the instruction to stop? And she says, we don't know, but that is a question that I suspect will be answered because these firefighters will be interviewed.
Right. We heard the air traffic control audio from the moments right before the crash where air traffic control was saying stop, stop, stop. And that is a central question. Did they hear those warnings? You also noticed, if you watched that video, the captivating and horrifying video of this crash unfolding, that you saw the truck start to turn, or it appeared to veer out of the way or attempt to evade the collision here. So those are still questions that we're waiting for NTSB to clarify, certainly. But the other question that Chair Homendy also pointed out was that this truck that crashed did not have a transponder. There is no requirement for these trucks to have a transponder. She said that if she had it her way, there would be transponders in every vehicle that is on the runway, on the active taxiways. And that's how this ASDI equipment is able to detect and avert crashes here. So that equipment has been touted as, kind of a solve to make airports safer, to make taxiways and runways safer. But if the transponders are not in the vehicles that are operating on the on the runways and in the taxiways, that of course is a problem, because then the software can't detect those vehicles and can't make those alarms go off when there might be a crash, Andrew.
Tom, thank you very much for your reporting. Appreciate it. Tom Hansen of CBS News reporting for us from New York's LaGuardia Airport.